how is it that you can ask people for what you want, and especially people that you admire? It's a really hard thing to do. And I want to give you my playbook today because this is front and center in my mind. I'm going to be hosting a summit very, very soon called the Obvious Choice Summit. You should be able to register in the description of this podcast. But I'm asking a whole bunch of people. There's 30 speakers, and these are speakers, well beyond the fitness industry. These are like very notable people in business world and in different industries. For example, like the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine is speaking at this event. The vice chairman of one of the top advertising agencies in the UK is speaking at this event. And a lot of these people are folks that I really, really admire. Some of them I have some history with. Some of them I have no history with. And I want to walk you through my playbook for asking them to participate in this event. And in doing that, my hope is what you'll get out of it is some really good tidbits of how to reach out to people, how to be specific in who you want to reach out to, and how to strategically and respectfully navigate this entire process. And there's kind of three parts of it, and I'm going to go in order after I get past a little bit of like intro stuff. Number one is you have to be very proactive. So basically, how to reach out, like the message that you send, is step 3 of 3, right? Like all of the work happens beforehand, because even the best message in the world won't work as well, especially if you haven't done the first 2. So the first one is how to be very proactive in figuring out who you want and why, and making connections with them ideally beforehand, even if it's just a couple days. And I'll give you an example of that. And the second is how to actually engineer your thing, whatever you're asking them to do. For my example, I'll tell you, like asking somebody for an hour of their time to speak at an online summit. How to engineer your thing to make it as easy and as appealing as possible. And then number 3 is the actual outreach. So like the actual message that you send and how you send it and where you send it, and even down to like how you find their email in some cases, which I didn't have on my original notes, but I think that that's an important thing. In saying all of this, whether you're hosting like an event or not, if you want somebody to like check out your book, or if you want to reach out to like somebody influential in your niche who you might want to collaborate with, like most of these things still apply. And so don't think that this is just about like an event. The first thing that I'll say is that you will hear no, but you'll also hear yes. But if you don't hear no, you're not asking enough. And it's okay to hear no. Yesterday, one of my idols said no to me. It doesn't feel very good when that happens. At the same time, this person doesn't know me. And when that happens, the first thing is like, oh my God, they don't respect me. But then you take a step back and you're like, actually, they have no idea who I am. I'm just another guy on the internet, which is, just important to make sense of. What it also means, though, is that some people are just in phases or seasons of their life where they're just not saying yes to anything. Like I go through stuff like that. It doesn't even matter who you are or what this thing is. Sometimes people just don't do stuff like that, especially if you're doing what I'm doing, which I'll talk to you about, like in the proactive section, where I'm not like trying to get influencers necessarily. I'm not trying to get people who do tons of podcasts. Instead, I'm trying to figure out people who are a really good fit for this thing, and I'll talk to you about what that means. But these are folks who don't set aside large chunks of their time to appear on podcasts, for example. And so some of the time, they're just like not interested in doing a thing at that time, no matter what the thing is. And so they're going to say no. That's fine. There's also going to be people who are going to say yes. That might surprise you if you don't ask, because another one of my idols said yes to me. And we're recording tomorrow. His name is Jonah Berger. He is a professor at the Wharton School of Business, which is probably the best, if not one of the best, marketing and business schools in the country. New York Times bestselling author of Contagious. He's basically the leading researcher in the world and thought leader in the world on word of mouth and social contagion theory, and a very good speaker as well. And so he said yes to me, but like somebody else said no. And if you don't ask, I mean, I don't need to say this, but I'm going to say this because I feel like you just need to hear this over and over again. I know that I do. If you don't ask, it's an immediate no. The worst thing that can happen if you ask somebody to do something with you is the exact same thing that will happen if you don't ask them. Still, there's a right way and a wrong way to ask. And so I want to talk about identifying your dream connections first, right? And shoot for the stars. Like, you might be surprised at how accessible people are when you reach out to them the right way. And that means that the outreach, again, is step 3 of 3. Like, you're going to have to put in some legwork beforehand. So we're going to talk about that. And then engineering your thing second. And then the actual ask. What did you guys think about when I first sent a message about this topic today? Because you know that I'm putting on this event. This is probably the first time that I'm announcing it, but
I was pausing to let Amber go. I feel like I always start talking when Amber's about to talk. So
I was trying not to do that because I always open my mouth too soon.
Right. So just for clarity in the future, Amber, when John asks that question, do you guys blah, 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 I'm always going to wait from this point forward for you to start first, okay? Just putting that out there. That'll save us time on a subsequent podcast.
So who do you think this applies to? Like what situations do you think that this fits in, this type of topic?
I mean, for everything. I mean, what's interesting about this to me is, and I'll be curious to see the parallels, because this is a lot to do with sales, right? Like you're selling an idea. And so I'll be curious to see what crossover there is. And also like, what can you borrow from this and apply to like selling to clients? And so my brain is kind of already like thinking about that.
So as I'm talking, if you could like if I say something like that, just jot it down, maybe revisit that at the end, because I think that's a really astute observation.
For me, it's super interesting because this is what I've been doing for like the last 8 or 10 weeks, because I've been having a live broadcast with people that are niche specific. I work with moms over 30, and like one of the first people that I got to have a live broadcast with me was Amanda Thebe, who authored a book called Menopocalypse. It's a big deal in the menopause world, and I had no idea that she'd say yes, and I did not know her, but I explained to her who I was, and I've been looking for a process to work on that I can get better skilled at, and I think that's what you're about to deliver here, so I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, and that's exactly what this is. I think there needs to be a lot more collaboration and a lot less siloed, independent effort in our industry and in all industries. You would be surprised at how open other people are to participate in something if you put these steps in order and make it easy for them. And you take initiative. Very few people actually take initiative when it comes to collaborating and organizing stuff. And the person who takes initiative, oftentimes, it's incredibly rewarding. So let's start with step number 1, which I call proactivity, but like basically step 1 is, who do you want to participate? Like, who are your dream connections and why? A lot of people who have like big audiences are probably not your targets. It's like, oh, I want like an influencer. I think we can do better than that. I think you need to work backwards from the problem a little bit more than that. What's your message? So for me, what's my message with the obvious choice? Well, now I've written this book. I have the 13 lessons that make up the book. Okay. So I know that I want people to align with at least one of the lessons, and that's what we're going to target in on. So I'm looking for people specifically who align with that. Similar to you with Amanda Thebe, who is wonderful and fantastic with Menopocalypse. Like, the reason that she said yes wasn't just you were some guy asking her on the internet. It's like, no, it very much aligned with what you were doing and the message that she wants to spread. And so she was excited to do it. Just having a big audience, like just going to an influencer, isn't good. Also, these people are often asked the most, and not like for very good reasons. A lot of people with big audiences just kind of are like popular on one platform, and they might be popular in your world, but they're actually kind of like pseudo entertainers, and they're not actually that influential oftentimes in the greater scheme. Sometimes they are. But my point is, they get asked the most, and they might not be a very good addition to whatever you're doing or align with what you're doing. So who do you want to participate in whatever you're doing, and why? And you always have to take a very customer client centric approach, which is step number one is who can bring the most value based off of the message I'm trying to put forward, versus who can make me look as good as possible. Okay? Often, people with great titles, but that aren't in the limelight, i.e. they haven't like worked on their personal brand for the last 5 years, are fantastic additions, both in terms of the value that they provide and the name value. So the name value and legitimacy of your thing. So Ryan Holiday talks about this a lot with like army generals, for example. An army general is a very good, like it's an incredible title. It means so much, but it's not like people are banging down their doors to get them on podcasts. And so if you're trying to add legitimacy to what you're doing, actually going after people with like really good titles, but that don't do a lot of individual personal branding promotional efforts is can be really powerful. And then you can also look for people who are, you know, maybe don't have this like massive platform themselves, but they're kind of promoting something at that point in time. So if somebody's just released or in the process or about to release a book or a product or something like that, for example, they're going to be much more open to participate and say yes to things than somebody who is not. And so, like I said, a few examples of people participate in my event are the editor-in-chief of one of the biggest business magazines in the world. And he does have a bit of a personal brand, but also just like a phenomenal title, right? Number one. And then, you know, the vice chairman of the biggest advertising agency in the UK. Again, phenomenal title. It means so much to the right person. It doesn't mean anything to anybody who's not interested in business or marketing, but anybody who's interested in business or marketing or small business, they'll see, even if they don't know the name of that person, they'll see the name of that organization, and it's very obvious this person is very important in that organization. And it's also that they haven't heard of it. Like, I don't know about you, but I listen to a lot of podcasts. I just like listening to podcasts. I don't need to hear Seth Godin on another podcast. Like, it just, I love the guy. I think that he has a very important message. But anytime that certain thought leaders, authors, whatever, come out with a new book, they do the rounds. And they say the same fucking shit on every single one of them. I don't need to hear that. But somebody who has this very interesting title, all of a sudden now there's this intrigue. It's like something that you haven't heard before. And so I think as this world matures, that's going to be more important. The other part of it is when you ask people, you don't want to ask everybody at once. So for example, I'm having 30 speakers at this event. I actually have a 3-pronged invite approach. And so I've sent out all of them now, but prong number 1 was I need an anchor. So anytime you're doing anything, you generally want one person or one thing that acts as an anchor where everybody else will want to be a part of it because that one thing is included. And so the first person that I reached out to, the first person that I got involved was Jason Pfeiffer, who's the editor-in-chief for Entrepreneur Mag. Because then when I reach out to other folks, I could say, yo, this guy is taking part. Even if they don't really know who I am, even if they don't know who he is, his title alone is like, well, I want to be associated with something that's associated with. So step number 1 is to identify an anchor and get them to sign on. And then I sent out my first wave of invites to people that I had a little bit of a connection to. And then I sent out my final wave of people that were more like Hail Mary passes to people who were like people I really admired that I really wanted to be involved, but folks I didn't have that much of a connection to. Because at that point now, I could say this person and that person and this person are participating. I'd love to have you involved as well. So you see how that kind of works as you go. You strengthen each time. And the folks who I'm naming are different depending on who I'm reaching out to, based off of either some combination of research into that person and blurbs, like if they have a book, like, did this other person like blurb their book? Okay, I know that they have a relationship with that person. Or are they just in the same world and I'm just pretty sure that they know each other? Like, kind of some of that. The other part of it is like, be familiar with their work.
Mm.
You know, Amber, so we just recorded right before this podcast. Amber produced it, so she wasn't on the show, but she was in the background with Ben Patrick, who's knees over toes guy. And he's one of the few fitness people for this event. I didn't reach out to him because he has a couple million followers. He fit very strongly, and Amber can attest to this, to some of the major themes in the book, and we had multiple areas of commonality. And that's why I reached out to him. Right? Be familiar with the book, not just like, oh, this person's popular, so I want to get them involved.
My favorite thing he said, said when you asked him a question, he's like, wow, you dug really deep. Like there was an appreciation for the amount of work that you did to not just come with the generic questions and reach out like everybody else probably does. And so it was fun to see him like kind of pause and be like, whoa, he actually did some work, And so that was kind of cool.
Right. Well, that's more interviewing, but for sure. And so the way to do that, I mean, with him, he's been on every podcast on the planet, from Rogan to everybody in between. And it's the same thing. I probably listened to 5 or 6 podcasts. I read as many articles. I tried to find anything that he'd been involved with that talked about his actual business and brand. And I could only find one article on the entire internet. And if you noticed, Amber, in a lot of the talk, he started to get into the fitness stuff. And I basically just grabbed him and brought him right out of it. Because that's his world, right? But that's not what I wanted to talk about, because I wanted this to be different in a way. But when I was listening to the other stuff, what I was doing when I was making notes of what I wanted to talk to him about was I was looking for little tidbits that I figured there was a story behind or I wanted to know more about that the host didn't dive into. Mm-hmm. And so you'll have to watch the event and listen to it. It's near the end of the interview where that happens with Amber. But be familiar with their work. And so in preparation for this outreach, I knew who I wanted to participate and why. And I went and I read most of their recent books. Like I went and I bought the book that they had just put out or whatever it is, and I read it. And I listened to some podcasts and stuff for them. Like, this is what I'm talking about, doing the legwork. You can't do this with many people, which is why it's so important to really narrow down on who you want to participate and why, and make them the perfect choice for your thing. I then tried, you can't always do this, but I then tried to follow them on a platform where they have the least amount of following, but they're still active.
Yes.
And I mean, they're still active. You can just see if they're posting consistently and recently on it, right? But for example, there's one speaker, I haven't heard back from her yet, so I'm hoping that she'll say yes, but there's one speaker who's like really big on Twitter, who I want involved. And, like hundreds of thousands of followers on Twitter. But on Instagram, she has like 3,000 followers. Well, she posts on Instagram almost every day. And so my outreach to her was on Instagram, right? Not on Twitter, because she clearly has a lot less noise there, but she still hangs out there. So if that exists, that's what I'm looking for. And then these people, well, I'll tell you 2 examples. So one of them, these people, like, I try to identify folks just over the years that I really want to get to know. And I'll subscribe to their newsletters, and I'll follow them, and I'll respond to an Instagram story every once in a while, or I'll respond to a newsletter they send out every once in a while. That's how, Jason and I, Jason Pfeiffer, the Entrepreneur Magazine guy, like, he sends out a great newsletter. Like, I respond to it every so often. I follow him on Twitter or on Instagram, and I'll respond to a story every so often. Right? Just keeping kind of top of mind so that then he has some, like, positive affinity for me. But in this other case, I had not followed this person or done that legwork. Well, I didn't just reach out to her with an ask. Instead, I read her book, I followed her on Instagram, and I responded to a story that she put out with a very specific, like, hey, like, she put out a story of how her book hit some chart or something like that. I was like, oh, that's awesome. I'm reading it. It's fantastic. I specifically loved how you did this one thing, and I've never seen it done that well before. And it was like halfway through the book. Like you had to have read the book in order to say that. And that was it. Right. And then I think I tagged her in a story of me reading the book or something like that. But that way, at least. And then when I send the invite to her 5 days, 6 days after that, there's at least something there. It's not just a cold invite. We've responded back and forth, had some sort of positive interaction. So do the legwork. That's the main crux of this. You can't do the legwork with a lot of people, which is why you really got to be specific on who it is. But, like, very few people do the legwork. Mm-hmm. Become familiar with the work, know why you are asking them, and try to nurture some sort of a relationship ongoing. It's this idea of digging the well before you're thirsty. When you ask somebody for something or to participate in your thing, it shouldn't just be cold and they don't know who you are. You may not have had the chance to, like, have beers with them, but hopefully you have at least had some interaction with them that's positive at some point. And then by the time that you reach out, they should be familiar with your face, at least, or your account, whatever. Right? Any thoughts on that before I move on to the actual engineering of your thing?
I got thoughts.
I don't like this, Ren, because there's too much of a pause. So just interject.
Yeah, I hate talking over Amber.
I know.
It's okay. I rescind that new rule. So yes, I do have thoughts, because this is my one pet peeve about people asking me to do things. I'm not on the level of the people that are going to be participating in this particular event at this moment. But because of this podcast and other things that I've done in the industry, I get the opportunity to be on podcasts all the time. And some of the things that I hate specifically as the recipient of an invitation, because let's be honest, at this point, I get on anybody's podcast. Like, it's not, I'm not in an untouchable space. I'm not super busy. You ask me, it's pretty, yeah, I'll get on your podcast, no problem. But I hate when people say, send me a picture, send me a bio, tell me what you want to talk about. Like, you've lost me. Yeah. You have no interest in having me on your podcast, because when I'm reaching out, and John, you'll probably talk about this, same thing for me. I did the same thing with Amanda Thebe that I did with Chrissy King, who is an author and activist and has written stuff for New York Times and Self Magazine. I read the book first, and both of those people that I talked to in the live broadcast, they both said the same thing to me. Wow, you really actually read the book, didn't you? Nobody's ever asked me a question about those two things in intersection before. It's such, on a previous podcast, John, you talked about that extra mile when you're at like a national park. You said, everybody's there at the beginning, and then you go like just one extra mile, you got the whole park to yourself. This is one of those examples, because if you can do that, you endear yourself to the person that you're asking for this favor, because across the board, people just don't do this. And I was itching to agree with you. To do. It's so easy. Because everything's so Googleable. Reading a book or listening to 3 to 5 podcasts of that person being interviewed, you easily get the pattern of all the things that people are avoiding asking. And those are the things that when you ask, they endear you so much to that person that you're talking to.
And if they're
I
not
love this
important
part.
enough, if they're not important enough for you to do that legwork, or if you're not as interested enough to do that legwork,
Right.
you don't work with them.
Yeah, just why even bother? I'm
You don't
taking
work
notes,
with
by
them.
the way.
Okay, I want to talk about engineering your thing. This is actually, I love the idea of engineering products. This is something I wish was spoken about more, and I'm probably most passionate about this than any other topic here or most other topics today. We've spoken so much about how we've engineered Quick Coach, the software that we have, the free software that we have for trainers. You can go and make your account at www.quickcoach.fit. We've engineered it to work a certain way for a certain type of person, and we are very distinct in who it's for and who it's not for. If you have more than 50 clients at any given time, it is not for you. If you're a regular trainer who trains general pop clients, it is 100% for you, either in person or online. If you train high performance athletics, it is not for you. Right? The same thing when you think about books, for example, or any product really. Like, marketing will only get you so far. I've been reading a lot and listening to a lot and studying a lot of book marketing lately because I've already started the book marketing for this book. And overwhelmingly what you hear from people who have sold millions of copies is like, yeah, we did a really good job marketing it. Like, everything hit. Like we did these things, boom, 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 everything hit. But like, even a massive platform and like even a great marketing strategy, it'll sell 100, maybe a few 100,000 copies. Like, at a certain point, the product has to take on a life of itself. And you see that. I mean, you talk about like Prince Harry's book, for example, compared to Atomic Habits. I get sales figures sent to me in email every single week of the New York Times best-selling books. Atomic Habits is number one every single week. And not even by a few copies, like by 5,000 plus copies every week. And you see these other books like jump to the top, right, for a week, and then they just go right back down. You're talking about Prince freaking Harry. You can't have a bigger platform than that. It'll only get you so far. The engineering of your thing is so important. And so here's how you engineer asking somebody. Like, you have to engineer the product or the way that you're asking them. So here's how I do it. Number one, you got to make it as easy as possible to participate. So we're hosting this online digital summit. It's happening September 15th to 17th, but it's not a live summit, i.e., speakers aren't presenting live. We're pre-recording everything. Now, is that ideal in terms of the summit? Maybe not, but it is a almost impossible ask to try to organize 30 speakers in 30 parts of the world to be available at very specific times, like this hour of this day, to participate. And so this way, when I reach out to them, I can say, hey, I need an hour of your time, anytime on your schedule, sometime in the next 2 months. Some of them we're recording this week. Some of them we're recording, I'm booked up to August 29th, which is a month and a half from now. You have to make it as easy as possible. Remove all elements of friction. Number two, try to add in some sort of a feel-good element. Like, even if they don't really know you, it has to be about something bigger. And so that might be the purpose of what you're doing. But if it's something that you're doing that's like super for profit, like for your own profit, it's going to be way harder to ask somebody else to participate because they're like, why am I building your business when I can just build my business? And so this event, this digital summit, I'm paying 100% of all of the costs. And then all of the proceeds are going to a charity. And you could say that, and that's fine. But if you tell a story, it's even better and more meaningful. Carolina Balmaras, who used to be a co-host on this podcast back when it was the Online Trainer Show, last year, her 5-year-old daughter Nova had a headache on a Sunday night. And it got so bad that they took her to the hospital. Within 48 hours, she's in full-blown surgery for a brain tumor. In the 9 months that followed, this poor 5, now 6-year-old girl, Nova, went through 6 rounds of chemotherapy. It's so unfair. I can't even, there's no words to describe how unimaginable that is and how unfair that is. And so the situation's hopeful. She's done all of her chemo. She's in remission. There was a foundation. So I reached out to Carolina and I said, are there any foundations or hospitals that really supported you during this time that you want to, that I can help, try to help, right? And she told me about the Tyler Robinson Foundation. A lot of people understand intuitively, right? When you have cancer, there's research hospitals, there's treatment hospitals. What is less spoken about is the impact on the families when there's cancer. So the Tyler Robinson Foundation provides financial support to families that have had a case of pediatric cancer to account for things like loss of income. Right? Carolina basically couldn't work last year. Transportation costs, helps to pay leases or mortgages, basically just helps them get by financially. And the stats are staggering. 1 in 4 people say that, 1 in 4 families say that they, because of the pediatric cancer, they were forced to get into debt that they don't think that they will ever be able to get out of for the rest of their life. Okay. So I've decided that 100% of all the revenue that we take in from, if I do any sponsorships, but also sales of the recordings and things like that, are going to go to support the Tyler Robinson Foundation. And that's not profit, that's revenue. So I'm paying 100% of the expenses. It's just, why are we doing what we're doing, right? If we can support that. But also think about how to add as much leverage as you possibly can to your ask. Yes, you can make it as easy as possible. Yes, you can make the commitment as small as possible. But then how can you add as much leverage to your ask is you can make it about something bigger than yourself. If I were to, let's say that this event takes in, $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 versus the social capital and the relational capital that I'm going to get donating that $30,000 to this charity. It's a no-brainer from that perspective as well. And then the final aspect of leverage is, can you engineer your thing so that it benefits the people participating as much as humanly possible? Instead of just saying, yeah, I'm doing this business summit where we're all doing this for our own gain. Well, no, number one, now it's super easy for them. They're doing it for a cause bigger for themselves. Also, that aligns, like the financial component. We're all business people. This is a business event. It's nice to be able to support something that financially supports these families, kind of aligns that way. And then afterwards, all of the talks are going to be put on our podcast very, very slowly, dripped out one by one by one, So they're also going to get the long-term benefits of being on our podcast, and it's going to push people back to the event to buy the purchased recordings, which is going to contribute even more to this charity over time. And so you see what I mean when I talk about engineering the thing and how to make it very, very difficult to say no, and how to be excited to say yes to it, even if you don't quite know the person. Like, you have an anchor speaker that other folks want to be associated with because of some title, or because they're just like a quote unquote important person in that world. You've made it easy. You've created leverage in terms of, they're going to talk at the event, then they're going to be put on the podcast, then it's going to push back to the event, and you've added this feel-good component. And then I've now been put in touch with the head of basically like corporate giving to this foundation, and there's probably going to be a fair bit of media around it as well, that they were going to push forward because it's a way for their foundation to get out too. Engineering your thing. Number 2. Sorry, I'm still thinking about Nova and how unfair that is.
I think the most important thing about step number 2 is the fact that it requires somewhat of a slow burn, but it also mandates thoughtfulness about who you reach out to, why you reach out to them, and the manner in which you do it. And again, that's often lost. Like, all 3 of us here have social media, and we all know what's going to happen when someone reaches out to us, generally speaking, about something that's going to profit them only. Like, and it just happened to me yesterday. I see 24 different posts of mine that were all liked at the same timestamp. Then I go to my email.
Check your DMs.
Check your DM. Let you 24 likes, 1 message. Right. Check your 1 comment, bro. Check your DMs. Then the DM, sorry to bother you, Jones Fitness, or some thoughtless variation of what my handle is. Never my first name. And then you have a big ask, and that is the worst way to do this type of any type of business, really. And again, it takes me back to what you said, John. Like, I'm always replaying that story the way you told that story about going to that national park and just super crowded around the car parking lot, maybe a mile deep, and then you've got the whole thing to yourself. And it's such low hanging fruit to just be thoughtful in your method here. Because these high level people that you think are out of your league, they're getting tons of the worst possible interaction and ask that you can believe, and you stick out so amazingly just by being thoughtful in their approach. I love number 2 just as much as I love number 1.
It's another iteration of the whales and minnows approach, isn't it? Where you really don't need a lot of these relationships. In fact, you really actually only need 1 or 2 of them, because then you can even leverage that one and use that one as an anchor to get into others, because now you're like vetted almost in a way.
Right.
You're trusted. If somebody trusts vouches for you or is participating in a thing, you're now trusted. So you really don't need that many. And a lot of the approach, the people that you're talking about, I mean, these firms, it's like, hey, have you thought about doing short form videos? I'm a short form video editor. I can help your content blow up. It's like, yeah, you and 50 other people who have DM'd me today. But how are they different, and how do they stand out? But to me, it's another iteration of the whales and minnows. You are so well served by being very specific and precise for a few very high quality interactions than you are low ones. A good example of this is Adam Bornstein. Amber, do you mind finding the episode that he was on? We interviewed him on this podcast, and that's basically his career. Is he's the ghost behind Arnold Schwarzenegger. He doesn't go out and try to interact with all of these people. he just was able to get himself in because that was like his focus with Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's like, if you've got the Schwarzenegger media empire, you don't need anything else.
Oh.
He's the whale of all whales. and how did that change? Well, okay, now he's formulating the supplement for LeBron James.
Right.
Because Arnold Schwarzenegger and LeBron James share a money manager who's obviously a Jew. And then I can say this because I'm Jewish. This is why we have a Jewish guy, a black guy, and a white woman on the podcast. We can say whatever we want. Y'all can't get mad. There might have been some strategy in that.
Not wrong, though.
It's not wrong, though. Well, I asked him, I was like, what did we say on the show? We're like, blink twice if he was Jewish.
And then I went on to describe his blinking for the audience who couldn't see him.
Blink 3 times if his name was some iteration of Gold or Goldstein. Let's go on to number 3. Let's go on to the actual outreach. I will start this section. This is part 3 of 3. I'll start this by saying this is the least important of the 3. If you do a good job with the first 2, it really does not matter much what you say or how you say it. But this is the one that everybody sees. And when you started listening to this podcast, I'm going to call you out, Benjamin and Pam. When you started listening to this podcast, my guess is that you were hoping for some sort of magic email or template or way to ask somebody for something, and just like some combination of words that for some reason work well. And so I'm going to read you the email that I send to people. But I'm prefacing it by saying it really doesn't matter that much. Because for the people who I did the first 2 things right, I don't even know if they read the email. Like Rory Sutherland is one of the guys, he's my hero. He's the vice chairman of Ogilvy, UK. He responded to my email like probably faster than you would have been able to if you read my whole email. But Rory, I had emailed him when his first book came out, The Wiki Man, and thanked him for it. And then when his second book came out, I bought 500 copies of it, and I had them shipped to our students and customers across the UK. And when he came to Toronto, he did some speaking thing across Toronto. I saw him 3 times in 2 days. I went to every talk and sat in the front row, and I had breakfast with him one of the mornings. And then instead of sending him an email, I responded and sent him this pitch to participate in this thing in response to the message of the bulk buys of his books. You know when that message was sent? 2018.
That was a big brain move there.
Yeah.
This is
that's some Jedi shit.
But this is why, this is how this fucking shit works.
Right.
This is how this shit works. You build relationships over a long time, and you build trust with somebody by legitimately caring about and following and supporting their work. It didn't really matter what the email said. Right? Okay. That having been said, here's the email. So we worked hard on a template pitch, first off, and then we individualize it for each person. Now, the most important things that I think about when I write these messages is, number 1, get to the point quickly. Yes, you have a story to tell. Yes, this is important. Yes, there's a charity. Get to the point quickly. I need an hour of your time. In bold. Right? And I'll read you the email in a second. Number 2, make it scannable. So instead of just having paragraphs, give headings and make it scannable. And then number 3, just try to highlight the important points that you think that they need to know. You can't say that much in an initial email. you just need to give them the important points that they really know. And then have a section to individualize it. It doesn't have to be much, but add a section specific to them in like either why them or what you're like looking for specifically for them. And so I'll read you this email. So this is the email that I sent to Jonah Berger, and you'll be able to pretty quickly pick out like which parts are templated and which parts aren't. So it starts. I'll read you the whole thing. It's relatively long, but I think it's valuable to read it. So it goes, Jonah, 3 exclamation marks.
Mm.
What's the book? Oh my God, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Mm-hmm.
The number one most beautiful word to anybody's ears is their own name.
Their own name.
Right. So again, the subject line is get to the point. What is this thing? You're not tricking anybody. Subject line is podcast interview request. And then in the brackets, you're the obvious choice, exclamation mark. Okay. And that's the same subject for everybody. Jonah, 3 exclamation marks. I want to share what you do and your books with a big audience, and I figured out a way to add a lot of leverage. First line. Now, if they have a book or books or whatever it is, I change that line like a little bit. You know, some people didn't have books, some people did, whatever. But that's the general idea. Like, I want to share with you with a big audience, and I figured out a way to add a lot of leverage. Why is this different? Why is this? One line, right? And then underlined next line. Real quick. Here's what's going on. In bold, I'm asking for 1 hour of your time on your schedule between now and September for either an interview or a presentation. Get to the point. What are you asking for? Right? Next line. It's effectively a podcast, but I've devised a way for you to get more out of it. Next line. Underlined. So this is another subhead. Let me tell you how. Next line. I'm hosting the first ever Obvious Choice Online Digital Summit. These are all 1 line each, so I won't keep saying next line. It's a business recalibration event focused on getting away from the influx of quick hit, short-term social media thinking. So again, what is your thing? Why does it matter? What pisses you off? What are you against? I'm paying 100% of all costs for the summit, and I'm expecting 10 to 15,000 attendees. If you say yes, you'll be speaking alongside some of the smartest and most notable names in business. And then in bold, already signed on to speak, for example, is Jason Pfeiffer, the editor-in-chief for Entrepreneur Magazine. So the anchor, right? And depending on who I was sending the email to, I might have used a different name or multiple names. And then this is the part of the template where there's something specific to them. Specifically, I go way back with your work and fondly remember leafing through your research back even before Contagious came out. A big component of the Obvious Choice philosophy is that buttons change, but humans don't. And I'd love for you to talk about why people use social media and some of your frameworks around that. Next line is underlined again. 100% of all revenue goes to charity. Very quick, don't need to say a lot. We're donating it to the Tyler Robinson Foundation, an organization that provides financial support to families with children battling brain cancer. Donations will be made in the name of my good friend's daughter, whom the foundation assisted during her treatment for brain cancer last year. You can say that you're donating it to charity or that it's for this thing. The more specific, the better. Some personal element is always better, right? Makes it seem more real, makes it seem more legitimate, which it might be either way, but it seems that way. And then it's just, I'd be honored to include you, underlined. All that's needed on your end is an hour of your time before now in September. We'll totally work on your schedule, reiterate the ask. I'd love to have you if you can make the time. If not, I totally understand. Can you please let me know either way? Make it okay for people to say yes or no. That's the email. Okay? Straight to the point. Kind of highlights everything you need to know. And then from there, 2 people have said no. We've got like 19 speakers or so confirmed now. And then it's just a matter of booking in the time. And then one of the things that you said, Ren, is like, and then what happens all the time is like, oh, can you fill out this 27 question form of all of the stuff that you want to speak about on the podcast? No, fuck that. That's my responsibility. Down to, we are going to write your bio.
Right.
And grab a picture of you.
Right.
And create all of the assets. And then we're just going to send it to you and say, hey, we put this together. Just want to make sure it's cool. If you want anything changed, let me know. Can you please let me know before the end of the day? Like, just super easy. And then when they come on, I'll be prepared for them. I might send them some notes and say, here's kind of the high-end stuff that we want to talk about. Like with Ben, I sent him a text message before and basically said, hey, was anything off topic? Just out of respect, but make it easy for them. The only other thing that I'll say is there's 5 or 6 people who I sent a message to on Instagram. And instead of sending a message to them saying, hey, can I have your email? These were generally looser connections. And I sent them a personal video. And the video kind of followed that script. So there was a call to action to watch the video that was specific, like, hey, have something I really think that you'll be excited about. Filmed a quick video for you. It's about 3 minutes, right? I have not got a great response from the videos. And one person in response to the video said no. One said yes. I think 4 have yet to respond. And all 4 have seen the message and have not responded yet. And I think that's kind of because it's just like when people check email, they're in work mode. When people are flipping through social media and they get a message, they're not really like ready to think about something like that. So, I mean, we'll see how it goes with those invites. But my guess is they saw the message and they said, this is too much to think about right now. And they left it on read, maybe flicked it to unread, whatever, and figured that they'll get back to it. And they might not. And it's kind of awkward for me to follow up now. So if I had to do it again, these were all personal videos to them, but I probably wouldn't do it through social media. Oh, finding their email. How do you know what somebody's email is? It's actually pretty easy. How do you, like, somebody who, I don't know, you admire because you've read their books or whatever it is, how do you figure out what their email is to send them a message? Well, you look at where they work, and basically every company has very specific email convention for their company. So all you need to know is the convention of the emails for their company. Sometimes it's like first name at companyname.com. In one case, it was first initial last name at companyname.com. And you could actually just Google like company email convention, and it'll tell you. It'll be like 78%, because there's all of these companies now that aggregate people's emails that you can pay for and buy them, and their freebie is basically to say what the email convention is for the company, and then if you pay, you'll actually get everybody's email. And in like some cases, they're personal emails too, which is weird, but I'm not going to message somebody at like their Gmail, most likely. Anyway, you can get somebody's business email really, really easily in almost every case. As long as you know where they work or you know their website name or whatever it is, you just search for that. You just Google search that email convention, and it'll say like 80% of people at this company use this email convention. And it's like first name dot last name at whatever. And then you just send that an email, and in almost every case, that's what it is. That's the playbook.
I took a lot of notes.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. It's hard, right? Building relationships is hard. Building reputation is hard. That's why it's valuable.
I think it takes more patience than it is difficult.
Okay.
It's hard when you're in a rush and you consider every interaction with every human as a conversion. That's when your life's hard. Instead of considering it as a as an engagement. Like if you're living that conversion lifestyle, everything I need to do needs to convert to dollars today. These are our most frustrated students. The engagement lifestyle students that say, yeah, I talked to some people today and I'm going to my local park this weekend and I'm doing something with my, like, those students have a wonderful time in the Online Trainer Academy. It's the conversion minded student that is often frustrated in the absence of any realistic timeline of building a business from scratch.
Yeah.
It's just not going to convert.
Well, I mean, okay, so look, the theme is dig the well before you're thirsty, isn't it?
Yes.
The themes, I would say, number one is dig the well before you're thirsty, which is actually all credit to what credit's due as a Jordan Harbinger thing. Podcaster, Jordan Harbinger podcast. Good dude. Smart dude. Great podcast. And then the other theme is the specificity of who you reach out to is pretty important. Like you can't do this for too many people. So kind of really thinking through like what you want out of this and why, and are you legitimately a fan of their work versus are they just do other people think that they're famous on the internet and so you think they're famous on the internet, and then other people think that you think that they're famous on the internet because they dance on the internet funny, and then all of a sudden like they've just become popular? Because that's kind of how it happens a lot of the time with new age celebrities. Is it's that what they're doing is actually quite silly, and if you were to do that same thing it would be silly and nobody would care, but somebody sometimes said this person is good or followed or they got in early or whatever, and then other people followed them because people were existing following them, and then more people followed them because they had a bunch of people following them, and all of a sudden now there's not a lot there, there's not a lot of substance there, but they're just like quote unquote famous on the internet in this little like circle jerk filter bubble kind of thing. It's not a bad thing, but you got to look past the superficial numbers and also try to be a bit of a talent scout. Like, is their work legitimately good? Are they showing up consistently, reliably, in very high quality ways over and over and over again? Because if they do that, even if they're not like a big deal in like that superficial way now, they will be.
Mm-hmm.
And the actual best way to build a relationship with somebody is to add value to them before they're a big deal and kind of be there along for the ride. Do you have that podcast number, Amber?
I do.
With Adam? What's the number?
Episode 67.
Okay. Well, thank you once again for listening to the Obvious Choice podcast. If you're not, I don't know if it's called follow or subscribe or whatever it is, but please hit that follow or subscribe button. I'm told that matters. I guess you'll see us more often, I think. I don't really know how it works. Anyway, do that thing that makes you follow us, please. We have fun doing this. If you're looking for another episode to listen to right now, if you just can't get enough, then I'm going to recommend you listen to episode 67. It's called The Ghost Behind Arnold Schwarzenegger and Tim Ferriss. And so this is an interview with Adam Bornstein, who I've known for, over a decade now. And he is the guy behind the guy and the girl in other cases. But he's the guy behind the person in some of the biggest, not just fitness, but like marketing names out there. So he runs all of Arnold Schwarzenegger's media brands. He basically ghost wrote two of Tim Ferriss's book and was his like CMO, was his like marketing guy for the launches for his podcast, his TV show, and I think two of his books. A bunch of other people that you'd recognize. And you don't know, but there's always something like that behind it. So we give some really cool insight there. So that's episode 67, The Ghost Behind Arnold Schwarzenegger and Tim Ferriss. Hope that you enjoyed this kind of playbook. It's something that's top of mind for me because I'm going through it right now. And I hope it helps. I hope you picked out like little tidbits of stuff that maybe you could start working on now and dig the well now before you're thirsty. That'll benefit you for years and years to come. Thanks, Ren. Thanks, Amber. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, John.
Right.
Oh, thanks, Ren. Thank you, Ren.